The New York Times reported, and I should say there was actually the first initial report came in the New England Journal of Medicine, a published study on Tuesday of this past week that the numbers that the government of our government reported as the death tally in the wake of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico was nearly, 80 times underestimating the number of deaths. This report suggested that it was nearly 4,600 deaths that took place in the wake of Hurricane Maria. And I mean, this is pretty astonishing if true, and there's really no reason to doubt this report. I mean, at least broad strokes.
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, this is the way that epidemiologists and other people who study these things, is that the way that they did this report, it's very standard, nothing unusual about it. They did, they went down there and they actually talked to many people and they kind of, put together statistically how this comes out. And, look, does it surprise you? Because it doesn't surprise me. That devastating hurricane was so awful, and the neglect that we watched, for a while anyway. I mean, there was a time when people actually seemed to give a damn about it. It was clear that people were dying, and they continued to die as a result of that neglect over a long period of time. In fact, there's a report today on CNN that says that they're still dying for lack of, the power is very intermittent. There's still a lack of infrastructure and communications that mean that people are dying prematurely. And I don't know how long that's going to go on. But this remains one of the most, horrific cases of what, of Trump's, I hate to say it, it's his racism. I don't know how else you can interpret this, because there's no other reason why this administration has neglected Puerto Rico when we had similar and, that was the same hurricanes that were running through in Texas and in Florida, where everything was put to bear to make sure that those places recovered. Now, granted, Puerto Rico had a much more rickety infrastructure to begin with, all the more reason to devote even more resources to trying to bring it up to snuff. I mean, this is an American territory. These are Americans that live there, and this would have been, Trump, for all of his talk about infrastructure and building new airports and what have you, you'd think this would have been a chance for him to prove his great building capabilities, right, and create this brand new spanking infrastructure in Puerto Rico. But no. I mean, it has been nothing but neglect from the very beginning, and a lot of people died. And, I think you remember when he went down there, that horrible visit, that one that just still makes my stomach turn thinking about it. And he threw paper towels at people's heads and said, "We're doing a great job," and everything. He bragged that, my hurricane was twice as bad as Katrina, and, we only had, I don't know what he said at the time, it was like 19 deaths or something. But it was very few, it was a very low death count compared to Katrina. Well, now, of course, it turns out that this is a much higher death count, unsurprisingly. Not that it's a competition, for God's sakes. Both Republican administrations, the Bush administration and the Trump administration, proved that they don't care when a population is affected that isn't one of their populations, right? I mean, let's face it, Katrina, a lot of black people, Puerto Rico, right. A lot of Hispanics. So, there you go.
Well, yeah, and what's fascinating is, there's obviously an element, particularly in terms of Puerto Rico, but we saw a similar dynamic, frankly, in the wake of Katrina, which was that you've got like vulture capitalists moving in there. Particularly, they've already, in many respects, ravaged Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico disadvantaged for multiple reasons economically, that run from maritime laws and to their lack of representation and whatnot. So this is prime opportunity for people to come in and scoop up properties and whatnot, and to a certain extent, there's also, the element of because it's not mainland, it's a little bit more difficult for there to be reporting coming out of there. But at the end of the day, we've had, I think news media outlets on some level really attempted to cover this, stick with it for a while. The American public obviously doesn't have the greatest of attention spans, but there was certainly enough attention being paid that one would have thought the administration would have acted upon this. And so it's, it's sort of the classic Trump situation. They would say, well, they didn't vote for us and this and that. There's a whole litany of things, of reasons I'm sure they have in their mind for ignoring what's going on in Puerto Rico. But the fact that there's nothing to intervene and say you have to care about us, I really think that is where we see the racism of the administration come out. And frankly, to some extent, broadly speaking, the country. But, the country moves on from all of these things and presumes that our government is taking care of it. And they clearly did not. And as you say, this is still an ongoing tragedy there. And there's still people who have no representation within our government. So there's really no mechanism to hear from them at all.
Well, it's interesting because, after November, there actually might be, and it's causing a lot of problems, especially down in Florida for the Republican Party. And here's why. There's a Republican candidate down there who actually is on record now saying that the Puerto Ricans should not be allowed to vote. Well, they're American citizens, and if they move to some American state, just like if you did or I did and we moved to another state, we don't lose our right to vote. And although they can't vote when they're in Puerto Rico, they can vote when they're in the mainland. And he's proposing that be changed. And the reason for that is because these people are not happy with the administration. There are hundreds of thousands of them, many of whom are going to be eligible to vote. I mean, it's a real diaspora, right? The same thing happened after Katrina. A lot of people moved to different states. But this situation is really very distinct because it's creating a bunch of new voters. Yep. And this guy, his name is John Ward down in Florida's 6th District, who says that he... Sorry.
And I saw the tape of that, of his comments. And what also shocked me about it, no one in the room said a word about it. No one said, hey, wait a second. These are American citizens. It was pretty crazy. And you try and listen to that and substitute the words like Massachusetts for Puerto Rico. And then you see how sort of disgusting a comment that was. All right. Well, listen, Heather, we've got to take a break. We got more news to talk about. We'll be right back in just a moment. I'm Sam Cedar. This is Ring of Fire Radio.